Just to repeat, sorry, my name is Liz Miller, and I've been coming down here about 10 years plus maybe, doing different workshops. I am the president and founder of Summit Place Financial Advisors, and I use both of those designations, the Certified Financial Planner and Certified Chartered Financial Analyst, in our role. I'm sure you hear from many, many different financial advisors, and that's not what we're talking about today. Our firm is very focused on multi-generational families. That is our unique niche. And we, more and more over the years, you know, in addition to all the wealth planning, as we say, we do a lot of helping families and each generation prepare for a number of things. And at least speaking for myself, and maybe you can say the same, I'd say over the last handful of years, I've seen a lot of clients go through a health emergency, go through a family emergency, and sometimes things unfold directly the way we want, and sometimes they don't. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how to hope that the best outcome in every situation is what we want. And what I said here is, of course, you know, this is our goal, that we can keep doing this forever. We're together, we're stress-free, we're enjoying time with each other. But what I often see happening more and more is that in an emergency, you immediately kick into caring about your spouse. All those knowledge, thoughts you had, all that rational decision-making you can do every day on your own without a question gets focused on the issue with your spouse. And suddenly, what happens? Your children come in. Your children come in and they say, Mom, I really think we need to. Have you called? Have you done? Dad, where is the? And what I'm hearing is, you know, this is wonderful and it all tends to work out okay. But as things unfold and you are past that emergency moment with your spouse when things are settled, the conversations I'm hearing is, well, I wouldn't have quite done that, but Mike arrived, and he did this, this, and this to help. Right? Does this sound familiar to people? So what we're going to talk about today is 5 different areas of discussion that I would encourage you to have with each other, with the loved ones in your family, so that when the time comes, information has been shared. Preferences are clear. You've talked about things when it's not an emergency, when you're not scared to death, when you're not having to quickly make phone calls. And that's what we're going to talk about today. In front of you is a handout, but at the very back of that is a, for those who are in the room here, is an evaluation form. So I'm just giving you a little bit of the paperwork you've got. At the end of today, if you would please bring me that evaluation form, I have a one-pager up here I will give you in return that is a great little worksheet summary of what we're going to talk about today to give you like a plan to work through. And you can, I don't know if you can see, but it's got like a checklist and stuff. So it's going to follow exactly what we talk about, but it also is going to give you a chance to make sure you keep on track yourself and get some of these things discussed. The first thing we're going to talk about is kind of what I call critical information. How many can relate to the picture with the little Post-it notes?
Oh, yes.
Yeah? Post-it notes around with important information, phone numbers, passwords, the like, right? The other one I found, I was out with a client recently. She had all this info. She wasn't a Post-it note person, but it was all in the back pages of her yearly address book. And that was fine until in the moment she was quickly trying to find something and couldn't remember what page in back had the latest information that we had there. You need to have information really readily available. A couple weeks ago, my husband had a colleague, very sick, senior colleague, and he was dragging his feet. My husband was on the phone out of work going, get yourself over to Weill Cornell. Get over to that emergency room. I am meeting you. And the two of us went over, couldn't go in, of course, because of COVID, outside, to meet him and his wife and to make sure that things were taken care of. And one of the reasons my husband came along was he knew the wife sometimes get flustered and wanted to be very sure that the emergency room would know all his medical information. And uniquely, my husband's firm has an on-staff physician who kind of would keep track of that. So he was able to make a call to this guy and say, we need to get all the medications dishes on and make sure the emergency room has it. Well, we were just thrilled that we could be helpful and do that. She's certainly capable 90% of the time, but in that moment when they were so scared, and with today's emergency rooms, one person, this, that, you can't be there, she couldn't quickly pull that information. Someone needs to easily know where it is, right? And you need to make sure that anyone can access it. So I have the picture of a little cell phone here. I think today most people have a smartphone. I'm sure there are apps, but you know, almost every smartphone also just has a notes. So one thing to do is just put it in the notes on the phone. Even if you're stressed, even if you're not on top of everything, you can bring up your notes and hand it to someone, and they will find the information in your notes section. So that's certainly one thing you can do. Separately, I suggest on a little piece of paper, good old-fashioned, periodically make a list of any medications that you're on. Include supplements, right? We're all over the vitamins, but that is important to include. And maybe, you know, any allergies or chronic situations someone may not be aware of, and a current doctor. Fold that little piece of paper up into your traditional wallet, right? Let's have the old-fashioned backup. It worked for years. It's good to just have there. If you're alone, if something happens, you take a fall, and your spouse is meeting you at an emergency room, somebody there will find it in your wallet, right? Or you can say, go to my wallet. Medical professionals, we're kind of going to go back to this kind of thing in a circular way, but make sure that you each know how to contact all your doctors. If you have separate primary physicians, you know, I was there with my mother recently even, who's like, yeah, it's doctor, you know, so-and-so. It's like, we need the name. We need to call this person, right? Make sure you know each other's doctors and the numbers and have them handy. It's not bad to keep a list of specialists or others that would be your backup or secondary person. You know, if God forbid one of you has a stroke, you want to quickly know the neurologist you'd like to have involved. And I'm sure in your circle of friends or family, there's been, you know, some experience with a neurologist that people liked. So kind of think through some of those people. An orthopedist, you know, a cardiologist or a cardiosurgeon, that someone, you know there's good experience with, just in case someone needs to reach out. The other important one, and you may have done this already, but you know, with the recent HIPAA laws, which now have been around quite a while, you need to proactively give permission at your doctor's offices for your spouse to be able to call and talk to them. Now, most physicians will take a call from a spouse, but just to be sure, and your children probably can't call unless you've given specific permission. So if you want one of your children to be able to interact with your basic everyday physicians and specialists, you need to proactively make sure they have permission. A lot of times the first paperwork you sign will have something on it these days that says, you know, who else can contact us. But if you didn't do it in that moment, if that was a tough decision, it's not bad to go back and say, you know, I'm not sure I put down so-and-so. Maybe we should put down one of our children. Maybe, you know, we should put down someone else. Then we kind of get to the basic records. I just thought I would include this because I know a lot of people ask about this sometimes. You know, what do I need to hold on to? What does someone have to get to? I call these kind of your permanent records that need to be accessible some way. These are ones that are hard, some of these are hard to replace. Not all of them, I'm sorry. Deeds and property titles are hard to get replacements of. So ones like that in particular, make sure you know where they are. Marriage certificates are hard. Birth certificates, so-so. Military records, these are all kind of, at times, important ones to keep. Know where they are both physically, but also keep track of them. It's not such a bad thing to be taking phone photos of them, just to have backups. Some of them, someone needs to see an original, but sometimes they really just need to see the information. So that's kind of a good thing to do too. For these bottom ones, just make sure you always keep your latest statement. If you're a paper hoarder and wondering, these are ones you don't have to keep all of them. Keep your latest pension document. Keep the latest certificate of insurance. If you're computer savvy, you don't even need to keep that little card anymore. I mean, it's good to put it in your car, but actually they all have apps. You can easily go online to almost every auto insurer and just print a new one out at any moment. So those are easy to get. Your life insurance policy, just need your annual statement. You know, very easy to deal with them. And the same with Social Security, just your latest one. Then keep track where all that stuff is. Where are the estate documents? If you have estate documents, the good backup is your lawyer does keep a copy. You probably have a binder. They always send you some impressive leather binder of all the originals. I'm like, just send me PDFs. I can't be bothered to flip through paper. But you make your choice. But they always keep backups. So I tell people, you know, I've had clients say, I'm just not sure I have them. Could you please get the lawyer to make sure I have them? We keep copies for clients, and we keep them in a secure vault so anyone can get if we need. But we tell them, look, you know, don't get too worried. It's good to be able to reach them, but your lawyers will have them. Logins and passwords, of course, are a big one, too. So what I mentioned here is that it's very good to use some sort of record organizer. I brought a few along. We have just a paper one. There's a website there for a PDF. AARP has one. There's a few you can find. If you like good old-fashioned booklet, I brought up some of ours along. And just to kind of show you here, you know, it just starts with who are your emergency contacts? Where's the safety deposit box? Where's the key? You know, where do you keep the, you know, the names of your children? Who's your attorney? Who's your accountant? And then it goes on and on to your documents. You know, where's the corporate documents? Where's the inventory of any business assets? So it has lots of different ones. A whole page for your insurance policies. Lots of these are available. I'm not trying to hawk ours. But I did bring paper ones for those who want to have something like that to keep on the shelf with each other. Since we printed this, I would say that, you know, these logon and passwords are even more important, so it's not in here. But put something in there. We'll be back at some point this year. I've often done a program here on cybersecurity and talk a whole lot more about how to keep secure passwords and keep track of them. I'll just quickly say, if you haven't heard of a password manager, it would be a great thing to have. Google now builds it in, you know, where it'll say, I'll save your password for you, right? So that's not such a bad thing. But you can get separate ones too. And if you do something like that, then in a book like this, you would just add one line and say, here's the login and password, you know, to Google that has all my saved ones, or to 1Password that has all my saved passwords. You know, that's increasingly important these days. And I'll have those up here, as I said, at the end, that you can just come take one if you'd like. Let's talk about health transitions. This is kind of, all of this goes to health. We know that. This is the core of it most times. But you really want to try to have some difficult discussions with each other before any of this comes up. And we all know, truthfully, the younger you are, the easier it is to have them. My husband and I have talked about a bunch of things, and one of the reasons we've done it is that when the time comes down the road, it's not that those might hold, but it's a chance for you to say to each other, you know, remember when we talked about this a long time ago, you wanted this. And if you're saying something different today, it's a chance to just do a reality check in a difficult moment, right? One of the first ones that I think is somewhat easier is just to talk about each other to, like, at what point do you want someone to be able to step in and make some major decisions? We've got a section where we're going to talk about financial transitions, but I put these in an order that I think is the easiest order to talk about them, right? It's kind of easy to talk to each other and say, you know, when do we think, at what point, what would you see in each other where maybe you want a third party overseeing things, We bring in people who are called personal daily money managers that are really helpful at just kind of, they're the one to check the credit card bill and see that, everything is what you said it would be. Or obviously, if you have a child that you trust doing that, you can give you access to a child at some point, just to keep an eye on things. So talking with each other, at what point, what would be the triggers that make us think we would want someone giving us a hand, giving a second pair of eyes, or having the ability to make decisions on some of these? Document who should be the first one to call, and maybe that goes on the little thing in your wallet. Where should a first call be made? And it might be to a medical professional instead of a child. It might be a third party. That is all fine. Obviously, the more you communicate now, the point is once you two are on the same page, if you and a partner, or if it's you alone, you and whatever children you want to share this with, if you do it now, then there is some idea of what it is you will want, right? It's not guessing in the moment. And it's not saying, didn't you and Dad talk about this? What did he say to you? Mom, what did he say to you? Back off. Back off. You don't want to be having to have those kinds of stressful discussions when things are done. I say here to document your trusted contact. What I mean by that, that's an increasing phrase at different places. It might be at a medical office, they might ask you for quote-unquote a trusted contact. A lot of financial places are asking for it. We have it later on. It's somebody that if that third party sees anything of concern, they want someone they can call. And it may or may not be a family member, a spouse. Financially, they do it when there's concern that maybe there's transactions in an account that look unusual, that look like maybe you've been coerced to start doing things. Maybe you've been convinced to do a huge withdrawal that's out of sync with things you've done before, and they might call the trusted contact just to say, hey, we're a little concerned. So that's what that phrase means these days. I want to bring up the cognitive decline a little separately. I know this is one that's scary for everyone, and everyone kind of faces it differently. But what I want to highlight to you is that we're going to talk estate planning docs here when we talk about health, but your advanced directive, your healthcare proxy, whatever word, phrase you're used to, sometimes even was called a living will. Hospitals give you one to sign now. You may have one separately on your own that may and may not be taken by a hospital, but they don't have language of dementia. They have very specific language that says who will make decisions when I'm no longer capable, right? And you might even have language in there that says, I meet that definition when two medical professionals say so, or if I've been, unresponsive for X amount of time. We have things like that. But if you have gone through a mental decline with any loved one, it is a very nuanced, long process, and it's not that simple. It's not so easy to be deciding, oh, you step in at this point. It's really understanding what each other might like at different steps along the way. So I wanted to highlight that. Discuss with each other how you want each other involved. Sometimes a spouse, and you may have seen this, right, is going to be by that person's side to the very end, long past a time when they don't recognize them, when they aren't involved. Some people, that's exactly what only they could imagine doing. Others might say to a spouse, at this point in time, that's not me. I don't want you doing that. I want you doing something different. It's very good to try to have those discussions. What kind of care you would want? There is a lot of different care given in a dementia declining situation. Medical care that supports life in different ways. Very important to talk about that. One of the things that can happen is you may or may not know, and I am not a healthcare professional, I've just seen this, for whatever happens in an Alzheimer's decline, it is not unusual to start having trouble swallowing and having food issues where everything else is fine. So they'll start, giving liquid food or force feeding, depending on your viewpoint for someone. That's an important thing to talk about and think about where that fits in. And think about what to do. So at the very back of this, I do have some links and resources of websites. There's a couple of different places out there that have started drafting, and every state is different, but they've been drafting language in separate documents of how someone wants to be taken care of in a cognitive decline. It's worth looking at those. It's worth having them, if not for legal purposes, as an advance directive might be, more for everyone in your family to be aware ahead of time what you're thinking and what's important to you. Some of them say things like, I want to be given ongoing food, right? And then it breaks out at different points in cognitive decline. If I'm ill when I'm still fully aware, if I'm ill when I no longer know my family, if I'm ill when I am bedridden, and those aren't the right categories, but it goes through various phases, and you can use that to share your view of these kinds of things. This is also useful to think about in mental decline from a stroke, of course, because that's more specific and more immediate, but same kinds of discussions. Very difficult discussions, I know. I think this is the hardest of all. But I've actually come up with 4 that I think are the absolute hardest. And if you can, I think they're important to try to have some discussions with each other so that you have some ideas what you might be thinking. I have the elder diagnosis of cancer there because in that situation, hopefully, and I've seen this a couple of times, certainly when the diagnosis is made, the person was mentally completely together. But I just think the shock of it in the moment and having to make decisions pretty quick are so important and so difficult that having some of those discussions earlier, again, is something that one of you might be able to think back to. We talked about this, and back then we were thinking this. You were thinking this. What I saw in that situation was, decisions had to be made quickly, and therefore the oncologist was giving, here's what I think you should. They don't quite say, here's what I think you should do, but they were doing the paths, and it definitely led to the couple feeling like, well, I think we should be doing this, I think we should be doing that. And they actually were able to step back and say, well, no, wait a minute, we've had other thoughts at different times. And they kind of reassessed, and they did, they took certain steps, but they didn't take all the steps that were presented to them. I just remember that situation as being, wow, that is a really tough situation to be quickly having to make decisions, right? And finally, on the health front, I'm saying, when you're talking health transition issues, after you've had these discussions, make sure your advance directive is up to date. If you haven't done your estate planning documents in a while, financially nothing's changed, you didn't think you needed to, the language on the health advance directives actually has changed. It's changed a fair amount. And if you don't want to go to your attorney, you probably can find one online. LegalZoom and such would have up-to-date ones. But that's a document that is worth updating if you haven't visited it in the last 5 years, God forbid longer than that, because the language of those has changed. It names who's going to make decisions, of course, when you can't. And again, the can't is part of what you're going to describe in there, too. When is it that you're writing in there for someone to step in? And rethink the who. I mean, it always starts with a partner. That's typically who's named. But sometimes it's the backup, if you haven't gone to it in a long time, that becomes important. I was just talking to an estate planning friend yesterday doing all kinds of documents for a client of mine. And this is a wonderful couple, no children, and really no family, very little family. And it's an interesting situation in that when we first started working together, it was very private people, and that's good and that's fine, and we respect that. But here we are 7, 8, 9 years later, and suddenly they were calling me at every step of this saying, Liz, will you be our backup executor? Liz, can we put you on our healthcare directive? And I said, are you sure there's no one else? Are you sure you would want someone like me doing that? I don't, I know you, but not so well. I would probably just follow a doctor's suggestions. And we went back and forth, and the call yesterday with the lawyer friend was saying, you are in these documents so many places. And I said, I do, and I was humbled by this. I was very humbled by it. I said, but I clearly, they only have each other and very little extended family. So if that's what they need, of course I'm going to step up and do that. I only share that because that backup person, probably that you wrote in those original documents, is forgotten by now. And so you want to make sure that backup person in particular is a proactive choice. Because most of you don't want your financial advisor in that role unless it's a very purposeful relationship and choice, right? You don't want someone who's your agent stepping in because no one else could step in. Any questions on any of that? Just to say, we're a nice size group, and feel free if you have questions along the way, but we'll have time at the end too. Let's break out living transitions. I think this is much more fun, easier to talk about. I kind of say here, you've already made one set of plans, right? How many of you have lived here your whole life? Of course not, right? So you've already made the decision at one point that you decided to come here and live right now in beautiful sunny Naples. I mean, it's just gorgeous, right? So that is great. What we want to talk about is Plan B, right? If something happens that you feel you need to make a change, I think this is an easier one, but equally important. You fall, you break a hip, you can't go upstairs anymore, you're in rehab. What happens is, you or your children are basically dialing for rooms, right? None of this, I've been on the wait list for 3 months, I'm ready to make a change, and you've just been moved to the place that you never wanted to be. You know them all around here. You know all the places, right? So this is our discussion that you want to make sure it's clear, what you want and where you don't. You want to identify the local places, including the hospitals, right? The specialists, the rehab places. Maybe you have a friend who has had to have a personal aide come in for a while. Maybe you have friends who have had personal aides for their parents that they liked. This is a great thing to just collect. Collect the names of the agencies or the individual person that got a great review. So you're not the only person who knows it, right? Discuss the places, right? Now, a couple of years ago, not even a couple of years ago, let's just generically say pre-COVID, I had a lot of clients around here who would tell me which of these, when we reach whatever, we're going to go to the terraces, we're going to go to Moorings Park, whatever it is. And frankly, they're now saying, I'm not doing this after COVID. That's where everyone got sick. So I understand the swing back and forth, right? But you will find I am an optimist. This too shall pass. And I've been to a couple of these places, and you can check me in anytime. I would love to be. I'm like, this is like a luxury hotel. I would love this. But everyone has their own opinions. And if you've kind of kicked around the same, maybe you do take a visit now, even though you're nowhere close, so that you can kind of be able to say, no, not at all, or yes. I have someone right now where the daughter is trying to tell the mother, and the doctor said, you can't live alone anymore. Well, that is like the wrong mental space to, for the first time, really go looking at the place she thought she would like to be. Because now she's like, no, I'm not going. I've been told 2 appointments so far have been canceled. And it's a great place. And, you know, when this wasn't the issue and she was totally independent in her home, it was one she would mention. But now that people are saying you can't live alone, she doesn't want to go. So I get that, right? I mean, we all get that. But again, places you absolutely don't want, places you would be willing to think about, you know, just a good thing to plan ahead so someone else isn't dialing for beds. You know, as I said, talk about it today, check in with your friends for those contacts. It's back to the whole point here. The whole point of today is that you decide, so in an emergency, no one else is deciding for you. And this is the kind of stuff, again, keep on a document, share with your family, put up on the refrigerator, you know, whatever it is, so it's not a secret and someone has to think about it in the moment, right? Wherever you want it to be. Okay, number 4 we're up to, right? Big one, big one. I say the time will come, you know, and it's no time soon. It is no time soon, we know that. And in fact, I found this great quote from AAA, senior drivers are among the safest drivers on the road. Wear seatbelts, don't drink, but of course, you drive in Florida. So we've seen the whole realm. We all know what it's about. You like my puppy in the seat? Do you take your dog with you when you drive? My dog just kind of sits down onto the floor and puts his head down. But I had a dog that always wanted to be looking out the window, and her favorite place was exactly there, front seat next to me, like checking it all out. So when I found that picture, I was like, that's Becky. That's Becky and me one day. Let's just, you know, you probably have no reason to have learned any of this, so I just thought I'd share with you what the Florida laws are. There are no required elder driving tests. There's nothing like that. But once you reach age 80, you have to go renew your license in person, and they do a vision test. Okay?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's all it is. So some states, you know, you hear horror stories about what they require. No, Florida's pretty simple that way. But the thing to know, if you've got those kinds of children perhaps, is somebody can call the DMV and say, I don't think Judy should be on the road anymore. I'm just giving you a heads up so you do my job for me. You know, you do my job for me. And then they will, quote unquote, investigate, you know, that you give a medical condition. So you might get a letter one day. I don't think they reach out to you and say, we're pulling your license. But you can get a letter that they've received a letter that you have an at-risk situation. And they, you know, will ask you to do some things. Usually you can ask for a review of that even if they revoke your license, just so you know, to keep these decisions your own. And what I thought we'd do in this is just sort of share with you some of the resources out there. In particular, you know, certainly if any of us have seen someone stop driving or children convince a parent to start driving, I have no special insight on this category, I will tell you. But there are some great resources for you and your spouse. And, you know, I have told friends about this. My husband and I, you know, plan to go through some of these and keep track of them. AAA has a whole area at exchange.aaa.com. There's a self-rating tool. You can rate yourself at how you're doing. There are resources there for a professional assessment of your driving, or if you feel one of you needs it. I found out there was someone called an occupational therapist driving rehabilitation specialist. You didn't know that someone specialized in that. They can do a driving assessment, but I also included it because obviously they're, I imagine they do an assessment 10% of the time, and most of the time they are working with people to get them back to driving who are, new knee, crushed hip, whatever it is you're rehabbing from. They will help you get those specific skills back, probably post-stroke. So good to know there's that kind of professional out there, I thought. Then they also have an online course called RoadWise Driver. Good to know about that because some states, some DMVs will accept that online course for any concerns they have. Right? I went and took the AAA RoadWiser test, course. Here's my certificate. You're good to go. See you later. ARP says to ask yourself these 5 questions. So I thought that was just good to keep handy. I'm sure those are no issue at all at the moment, but, again, to just have it as a resource someday to go back to, ask each other. They have a whole section called We Need to Talk, which is an online seminar for families. I'm letting you know about that because online seminar for families is code for your children are going to go to this and try to get you to attend so they can talk to you about your driving. Better that you look at it sometime beforehand without them, right? And you know all about it. Like, I got this. I know where we're going with this. This is your idea of a driver intervention. Make those decisions together is my point. Be proactive if you can. Be self-aware. University of Florida has this website, which is actually kind of interesting. It's an assessment tool that you do as the passenger with each other. And it says it has objective testing criteria. I didn't click through. I kind of saw where it started, but I didn't take the whole test. But I like it because it offers, once you go through it, it offers middle ground solutions, right? It might say things like, I think it's time that you stop driving at night, right? Or it might be good to take a refresher course. So it's, it's a kind of good for you to proactively do it and frame the discussion with each other. And the final thing on driving is, hey, in this day and age, it's great to own the car. Keep the car, but call Uber or Lyft. Why? Sometimes it's like, why do you have to be the one to do that? And if you are thinking about it financially, I will tell you that you probably will never spend enough on Lyft or Uber up to the amount your car cost. You could go everywhere you want to go probably unless you're driving, up to Orlando and back kind of things. But if you're just doing daily life with your car, you save more money using one of the main services. A lot of the communities on that page, as you know, have shuttle services, right? They'll take you to, the grocery shopping and the like, which is kind of nice because a lot of times when you get back, they're the ones taking all the packages and stuff instead of you dragging them from the car. So I've seen that before. That's kind of a nice thing. And the shuttle services, a lot of places also will, take you directly to appointments, particularly like medical appointments and stuff, so you don't have to worry about that. Separately, grocery delivery services, right? More and more you can just order what you want or leave it at the store and they'll deliver it, but you could do it without even going. And do know that, certainly in this county there are paratransit services. Everyone knows what that is? If you have been injured, if you are rehabbing and want to get somewhere, the paratransit services are usually offered by the county for free. So you could call an Uber or a Lyft, but also they will often come get you for free if you qualify during. It varies by location and what they are. A lot of times it's kind of a van. Certainly the vans will take like the wheelchairs and stuff. But
And that's free?
usually by the counties they're free.
Really? Not Michigan.
Okay. Well, and I can't tell you, I don't know for sure that it's free down here, but I do know they're available. Ride Naples is a local company. They mostly do back and forth to the airport, but they do some other places too.
But how do you find the paratransit services?
If you just looked it up on a computer for the county, I mean, it would come up with the county.
And what is B? What is B?
I knew you were going to ask that because I forgot as soon as it was there. It's it's a more local service like an Uber and a Lyft. And I admit, I put down the logo, I now have forgotten what they're called.
Yeah.
I think it's a black car service,
Black car.
you know, like limo and nice cars and stuff.
I have a question about this, though, because I've never taken a Lyft or Uber, and I'm going to tell you why, I think, but I'm not sure this is true. Liability. So in other words, they're not a service, in other words, they're independent contractors, correct? And I always worry about if there's something that goes wrong, 'cause I would never, my husband just passed, but I would never let him get in one. I'm like, if they're in a big accident, they're going to take everything we own. That's what I figured. Because I don't think they're licensed and bonded, so.
It varies by location what the requirements are by the state to be, to drive for them. So Uber and Lyft meet whatever state standards there are. So some states, they have to meet the same requirements as any TLC driver, and sometimes they don't. Does anybody know what the local Florida requirements are?
I haven't either.
I did not look that up, but they do have to, every state has, you know, evolved with different requirements. Certainly at their start, you are absolutely right. It was the Wild West,
Exactly.
but they've come a long way.
Yeah,
They
we
really
had
have.
ones in Michigan where the guy shot all the people up in Kalamazoo. With the guy in the basement. Okay, that's why I've never done one, I just always,
Well, and, you know, just to go back a page, what I did see that you do have here, which is nice, is there's something called Lyft Concierge. So if you don't feel comfortable if you've never used, you know, the phone app to call for a car, you could do Lyft Concierge, which is just like calling for a taxi, but you can call them up instead.
I thought they were just fancier cars or something.
No, the concierge service means that you can call ahead and say, I need one.
I like that.
And do you pay them a fee a year? Like
I'm not sure how I'm guessing it charges the same as I'm sure it's just the same as an individual ride.
I did not know that. That's nice.
Lots of good options to think about there. I think the problem with driving, we all know. In our society, driving is synonymous with independence. And we just have to slowly give that up. In a lot of the Asian countries, and if you know any Asian families here, sometimes depending how they're raised, they carry that over, it's the exact opposite. The whole idea is the minute a child is able to drive, the adults get in the back seat. And it is their privilege that they don't have to drive anymore, and the younger people drive the car. So we just kind of have this ingrained sense that, you know, having that control is the good thing, as opposed to, I got better things to do at my time back here, you drive. Finally, let's talk about some of the financial transitions. These are probably kind of the easiest to talk about, but I wanted to talk a little bit kind of about risks as we age. Older Americans are the #1 target of financial scams. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised by that. 1 in 5 older Americans, I don't know the age that counts as older, I didn't read the fine print. But if you want to, it's from the U.S. Consumer Affairs. 1 in 5 have been a victim of some sort of financial manipulation. 3.5 million are victims of some sort of financial exploitation each year. And that usually means, that can be as subtle that you don't even necessarily know. Maybe you're at Best Buy buying something and they've talked you into a higher level service than really is appropriate to that, right? You had the car serviced and the guy said, oh, I know them, says, oh, you really need that. So exploitation includes that kind of thing where we're just easily push towards things that we just don't have knowledge sometimes to. Anyone know why I have the picture of the young boy with the phone?
Grandson being raised.
Have you gotten that call?
Oh, yeah.
This is the current biggest scam. Do you really know your grandchildren's voice?
Yes.
They call and say, Grandma, Grandpa, I'm stuck on the side of the road, I can't get to mom and dad, I have no money, the tow truck needs whatever, I need you to do blah, blah, blah. Now, the blah, 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 any of your kids would say, we never send money that way anymore, we never do that. That is not at all. If you get the call from a grandchild, the thing to do is to say, I'll call you right back, or let me check. Don't do anything on that call. I certainly wouldn't want you to actually leave a grandchild hanging, but double check it. Try reaching anyone else in the family. Separately, call that person. Somewhere in your address book, you probably have the phone number of your grandchildren. Call them directly. No, I'm at a frat party. What's going on? This is huge right now, and a lot of money has changed hands. So, very scary.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
This happened to me
Oh, good.
and to one of my neighbors here. It's amazing. It was an email, and it was the exact email of one of my husband's best friends. Our neighbor, Michael, it was one of his neighbors here in Bonita Bay. The exact same email. And it said, oh my God, something happened. I just need $100 gift card from whatever it was. And then I was so gullible, I emailed my husband's friend back. I'm thinking, where are you? In Chicago, where are you at? And they didn't answer me. And so then I just put back on there, I reported you to the authorities for the scam. But that's a big one now.
Yeah, yeah.
And a couple people have fallen for it.
Yeah, send me a gift card, right,
It was like
exactly.
$100.
Like, what do you mean a gift card? That's not how you get money to people, right?
No, but in the moment.
I know, and they explain why that'll work. I'm
Yeah.
I've heard it on phone calls. I hadn't known it was doing it in email too.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
That's a very good answer.
Yeah, good to know. As I said, I've heard about it in the phone call. I didn't know they're doing it in the email now too, but yeah. Yeah, check separately. If you've received an email, text them. If you've gotten a phone call, email them. Use a different way to contact the person to see if it's real.
Block it, because clearly it's a scam.
Yeah, yeah. And, in those emails, I remember getting one from someone, they're really good sometimes at obviously it's the email you recognize, but the tone of the email can even sound like the person you know.
Exactly.
The right cadence of being casual, calling me Liz, that kind of thing. Often if you really read a second time and you're very careful, you'll kind of see the typos and stuff that make you realize it's not them. But, yeah. The other thing, and we mentioned this earlier, I mentioned, a third party that can do this, really got to check your credit card bill every month. They count on older people, putting it on auto pay, trusting it, not checking the charges that come through every month. I was just having a discussion with my own father, who was saying something about he was trying to update his credit card on Hulu and it wasn't working and it expired. And I said, well, what, have you been getting charged? And he was all flustered. Well, what do you mean? I'm like, do you look at your credit card statement? So then he's looking at his credit card statement. No, I haven't been charged since September. Are you sure? Because it's Thanksgiving. Oh, no, here it is in October. Because I was pressuring him, of course, that he wasn't finding it. But no secret, for both reasons. Maybe he really doesn't want to be paying for Hulu every month. I have no idea. But it's easy to also find things that are on automatic subscription that you forgot about, or you didn't realize when you did it, it was automatic. So credit cards reading that bill is important for that as well. A lot of them, you can enable an email or a text alert for card not present. And what that means is, when you buy online, you're not physically showing the card, right? That's a card not present transaction. Nobody has taken the card from you. So if you want some extra alert, you can do that. Most banks these days are pretty vigilant with fraud. But I just heard a horror story of a Bank America branch where someone had fraud and they gave them a really hard time because it wasn't caught for several months. And they said, well, our time frame's passed. So that's, again, you got to check those, every month when you get the bill, check it, because that's still a short enough time frame to say, hey, that wasn't me. A lot of them out of town, you'll get, a ping from your credit card company or someone. But if you use a local bank, which I know a lot of people love because you have relationships and people who deal with, their fraud prevention is going to be nowhere near as sophisticated or as timely. And again, that's where you have to really vigilantly be looking at your transactions as often as you can, because they're not going to point them out to you.
Used to be you were supposed to notify your credit card company if you were traveling out of state, what cities and what states you were going to. Now, at least mine doesn't require that anymore.
No, they don't, and thank you, because that's where I was about to go with that, and I thought about the small banks. The larger banks will flag those sometimes. They still will flag them. If something comes in from Mexico, then you have to proactively say, I'm here, that's good. But a lot of them will flag the foreign purchases. They don't do it so much in the U.S. as much. I actually, at one point, had to call my MasterCard and say to stop doing that. I was like, I travel frequently. I'm all over the country. You need to stop holding up anything from other locations. So I took that risk on myself, but I had to tell them the opposite. Please.
Yeah, I was going to add on to that. In my experience in some foreign countries, I didn't realize it, but they had a limit, and so I'm going to the ATM machine, and I was madder than I went in because I needed a certain amount. And they said, well, I said, what do you mean? And they do that. So I did the same thing that you did, is tell them something to put a limit on overseas.
Yep.
It was in Bangkok.
Well, and that would be, a high-risk place in general for that type of thing. You may not know, but you can get your credit report every year for free. The site is Annual Credit Report, not plural, not reports. They scam you. Report, and that's a good one too. The biggie I want you to check for is that all the credit cards it lists are ones you know about and you use. If it's an old one and you don't use it, you take the opportunity to close the account. But make sure no one has somehow used your name and information to open a new account, right? That you never comes to you, you never see it, but it's on your credit report.
I'd like to ask you, oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'd like to ask you a question, and you may or may not know this. What was I going to say now, sorry. I've always had excellent credit rating from the time I was yay high. My husband passed away, they closed one of his bank accounts, not mine. We had separate accounts. My score went down 200 points. Oh my God. So I called my Merrill Lynch guy and said, what's going on? Why, when you closed his account, I had nothing to do, my name's on it? He goes, I have no idea. And it came up on credit card. I'm like, what? How could it drop 200 points? It said, closed Bank of America account. I go, yeah, his, not mine. Do you know anything about that?
Well,
I've heard that.
well, you can, they can help you. There is, if you go to the credit site, it's hard to go through, but there is a way to get them to reassess and have that discussion.
But when I go to this credit report, like this thing here, or no?
Yeah, because what they're going to do, they're going to give you, they give you one of the three major companies.
Right, it said TransUnion, it told me.
So go to TransUnion's site and set up an account for yourself if you don't have one. You don't have to pay to set up an account and see your score.
I have accounts on all of them, but.
Yeah, and work your way through the correction part.
What? It's so ridiculous.
All I can think is it's because, I thought you were going to go down the path that we see a lot, is that everything was commingled and the person has no credit report. Right.
It was all separate.
Thank goodness. But the credit place, like, did you own a house together or anything? Like, were your both names on a mortgage or anything?
This one's in my name. The other one, for some reason, even though I owned it before I married my husband, they made me put his name on it. But it doesn't matter, they're paid off. So.
Yeah, it's just that they were able to associate you with them, even though you had your own individual credit.
Okay, so that's interesting. So it would be because his name was on my house phone.
Yeah, because you were joint on something else that they realized you're associated. But you should be able to contact them and push back, I think.
Well, I just heard it was very difficult to get him to bring it back up again.
It may take time, like they won't do it right away.
Yeah.
But if you get on the phone and push back that, nothing in your history changed, nothing that your name is on changed, they can, they may be able to get someone to do something. Yeah. If you don't know what a credit freeze is, I think more and more people know what that is. You can, again, go to each of the sites. You don't have to have an account. You give them information, and you can put a credit freeze. If you're not buying anything big, you have no cars planned, you don't have mortgages or no plans to refinance, this makes sure no outside person can get your credit report and get a credit card approved. So it keeps your credit secure. You can unblock it if you need to. You do go buy the car and they need to check it. You can unblock it for 24 hours, but you just need to keep track of that. Finally, let's talk about, not finally, second finally, ensure that it's really you. There's an explosion of withdrawal and wire frauds. Used to just be wire frauds. The latest thing we're hearing is people are figuring out literally how to get onto your log onto your bank account and send out money. So make sure you add two-step verification to all your accounts. Every bank, every brokerage firm offers you two-step verification. If you don't know what that phrase means, that means you're going to put in your username, you're going to put in your password, and then it's going to prompt you for some other. We're going to send a text to your phone, we're going to have you enter a random code we've just sent you, something to add another step to make sure it's really you. Facebook offers that. I think Facebook is evil, but if you're on Facebook, you can put it there too. Some of the others. We mentioned trusted contact earlier for your financial situation. That is a great thing to do too. Decide who you might like to have those extra eyes on your accounts. We talked about that a little bit. A child, most financial advisors will happily take that on and look at things for you. And then I did mention this idea, there is a professional out there called a personal daily money manager. It is a certification. They're kind of like bill pay specialists. But I've worked with them in a couple of cities. Everyone's unique. And they can be a real nice help. Sometimes if you're just dealing with a lot, with someone who shared recent widow, I'm sorry about that. But someone like that can come in once a month and help you go through everything coming in, make sure it's organized. We brought one in a widow situation where for 40 years she'd never even written a check. Didn't even know how to balance, a checkbook. Child was off in college, dealing with their own loss of the father. But we brought someone like this in, who at first came every 2 weeks and then monthly. And even when this person became able to handle and feel confident in everything, she just loved having the person come. Just a second set of eyes, periodically check that.
Was that a service you guys provided to them, or they paid for it, or what?
They pay for it. We know the directory. We have helped people find this type of professional. They charge by the hour. They are inexpensive. I have one in LA right now charging $75 an hour. We're not talking a high-priced professional. They just are a second set of eyes. Like I said, they can come in and help with bill paying. They can help you, organize a file that's gotten out of control. We had one come in once for a few months, and they just started doing so many things. But the person had, 20 years of paper financial files and said, I really need to organize this, I really need to organize this. And after 5 years of I really need to organize this, we said, would you like help? We know the kind of people who can go through this and tell you what you can get rid of. It's the kind of, those are the kinds of things these people do.
Pardon me, I'm just wondering, what kind of credentials would they have?
So there's an association for them that they do something to get part of the association and accredited. A lot of them are bonded. You would kind of want them bonded probably to come into your home, but yeah.
Where do you find out the information to give these people? Personal daily money manager, where do you go?
So I did not include this in the resources, but if you go online and you Google that, you will find the association of them.
Wait, what did you call it? I'm just curious.
It's right up there. It's a personal daily money manager.
So if you put that in your search thing,
Then you can find the association, and the association does have a directory of anyone who's part of them. You could find local people, but then you have to, look them all up and see what they do and if they fit what you're looking for.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Yeah. that's kind of, we went through all 5 of them. So, my point clearly on all of this, like I said, is now we've got the car without the dog. This is where we are today, right? We've got the fun car and all as well. But hopefully I've given you a lot of things to think about and sort of just doing some of the plan ahead. I know that you've got these in your handout. I know that you don't have links, but I wanted to give you the full URL for these. The first one is our PDF of that handout that I have here. For those online, you can get a PDF of it if you want there. The Dementia Healthcare Directive, there's a whole organization trying to get this improved across the country. You might like their resources if you want to include some of that. Here's 2 different sources of how to think about, how to evaluate different continuing care communities. One's from AARP, one's from Senior Living, questions to ask. Here's that resource for AAA. And Schwab has a great source of various articles for seniors. Different safety things, like we just talked about, putting on the credit freeze, understanding 2-factor authorization. They have been all over this because they have been the subject of so much fraud. This is just a little bit more about my firm, and I certainly appreciate you guys letting me come and share that. And I'm going through that because I am going to leave up, because my lawyers always tell me to be a good doobie, just make sure this is our full-page legal disclosure that has very little to do with what we're talking about today, but does say very clearly, we're not accountants, we're not a law firm. Today we're really talking about how to start discussions. We're not talking about anything specific. So I want to be sure that we're all clear with that. Please.
You go back to the preferred living arrangement options. What's your experience been with your clients who decide they love their home so much they want to stay there to the end? Obviously, that's an inexpensive move in the beginning, but could become very expensive at the end. And there's such a thing as loneliness that gets involved.
Yes.
What's your experience been?
So I've only had a few, thankfully. But what I see in here is this. I think a lot depends when you have a spouse, because it's all about staying at the home with the spouse. I will say it puts an enormous burden on the spouse, but we do that for the person we love, and we do it happily for the person we love. But what I have seen happen is if you say to each other, I want to stay here as long as I can, then you are committed to doing that for your partner, whatever it takes. And what tends to happen, just to know, and this is not bad, but the spouse will be very defiant to let you bring in help. I have seen that time and time again. No matter how wonderful people are, be like, when you say, I'd like to bring someone in a couple times a week. I'd like to bring someone in for a few hours. No, you're here with me. I don't want anyone else around.
Yeah.
And that's why staying at home to the end does become an exhausting burden on the spouse. Eventually, that works. Eventually someone will start coming in. Eventually you move to aides. You move to round-the-clock aides if you need it. And then when most necessary, if needed, you can do hospice at home or you do move somebody. I have a client that is at home with 24-hour aides after a debilitating stroke. Now, that kind of worked because obviously you needed aides. But what has happened, it's taken several years for the debilitated spouse to allow the other spouse to leave for any amount of time, because it became so dependent that became the whole social life.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question on the safety deposit box. Sometimes there are things in there you really need right away, and the bank is closed on Saturday and Sunday. How do you feel about having a safety or safe in the home with important information?
It's good you bring that up. It's important to understand that if somebody passes away, the bank can make it very hard to get to that safety deposit box, particularly for a child or somebody. So more and more, we're trying to balance that. Does it really need to be in a safety deposit box? If we're talking about certain documents, take pictures of them, have them separate. Certainly good to have a someplace in the house that's locked that can keep it. I think most of us where we're living down here, those documents that long ago we thought absolutely had to be in a bank vault, I don't think anyone's breaking into our house to get those documents anymore. So think about how you're using safety deposit boxes these days, because they can be very tough to access, not just because of the hours, but when there is an emergency or if somebody passes. If it's in one of your names, they can take a long time, even if you have power of attorney, for them to accept the power of attorney and let you access that box.
You should also, I think, have a cosigner.
Co-signers are great. Sometimes they're called a convenience signer, but be careful that if you are putting a child on an account as joint, just know that legally means if you pass, all that money goes to the child. And so if you have multiple children and you thought you were doing it for convenience so that, Johnny, who's really good with numbers, keeps an eye on things, you've made an estate planning decision, and legally that whole account has now become his when you pass. So instead, ask about putting, everyone uses different phrases, view only, convenience access, check signer, but not full access to the account. I'm going to stop 1 minute because I'm happy to keep doing questions and I want to, but I do know it's past 11 and I want people to be able to comfortably walk out if they feel they need to. If you fill out that last page, I will swap you the handout up here, but please. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm going to put these right in front if anyone wants that,
Oh, thank you.
to take that.
Thank you.
And I will trade you,
Thank you.
and I will trade you for your form. No, you're good with that. I saw you had it, that's why. There you go.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you. Oh, this is the organizer, yeah.
That's the organizer.
It's funny, even though you think you have everything done, you gotta start all over again, and especially after the loss of somebody, so.
Do you have any more organizers?
Yeah, I'm sorry, move them right there. Fill right in.
I need to write that name down.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I was online, like, can I come over and make out an evaluation and get a handout?
That'd be wonderful. I appreciate that.
If you have that,
Do you want this in hard copy?
yes, love it, love it, love it. And was there a thing that had